People of God, hear this word. There are moments in history when the voice of the eternal breaks through the noise of the world. Moments when the calendar of heaven collides with the calendar of man. We stand at such a moment now. The days of 29 and 30 August are not ordinary days. They are appointed days. A warning, a call, a trumpet blast from the throne of the Almighty. When God speaks of lockdown, it is not merely the shutting of doors. It is the closing off of distractions, the separating from the noise of Babylon, the pulling away from the idols of the age. It is a call to retreat, to humble yourself, to fall to your knees before the Lord of hosts. For as in the days of Noah, when the ark was sealed shut before the flood, so too does God call his people to shut the doors, to enter into the secret place, to hide themselves in his presence until the indignation passes. These 2 days are a window, a warning, a chance to return. The world shakes, economies tremble, nations rage, but God is not silent. He is calling his people, come out from among them. Be still before me, sanctify these days. For I am the Lord, and I will do what I have spoken. So I declare to you, do not take these hours lightly. Do not spend them in the marketplace of vanity, or in the endless chatter of man. Enter into your inner chamber. Open the pages of his word. Lift up your voice in prayer. Intercede for your family, for your city, for this land. For the days are urgent, and the time is short. The trumpet has sounded. The warning has gone forth. And the choice remains, heed the voice of God or ignore it and be swept away in the storm. 29-30 August, urgent lockdown. A call not to fear, but to consecration. Not to despair, but to return. Not to chaos, but to the safety of his wings. The Lord is calling. Will you answer? The days of man are filled with numbers and calendars, but the days of God are filled with appointments, moments when the eternal intersects with the temporary. The world looks at the 29th and 30th of August as nothing more than 2 ordinary dates. Numbers on a page, hours to be filled with routine, with business, with the endless cycle of life. But when the voice of God speaks, what seems ordinary is revealed to be extraordinary. These are not common days. They are appointed days. When God marks a time, it becomes holy. When heaven sets apart a moment, it becomes weighty, filled with meaning, charged with consequence. The 29th and 30th of August stand not as simple entries in a calendar, but as a summons, a call to awaken, a trumpet blast from the throne of eternity. The people of God must understand that prophetic timing is never accidental. The one who set the stars in their courses, who ordained the seasons, who determined the rising of nations and their fall, is the same one who marks out days and hours for his people to hear and to respond. Just as he appointed the feast days of Israel, just as he set apart the 7th day as holy, so too he ordains moments in history to become windows of encounter, days when his hand reaches into the flow of time and calls his children to return. The 29th and 30th of August are such days. When God speaks of appointed time, he is not simply declaring a moment, but declaring a purpose. These days are set apart for decision, for consecration, for turning. They are a pause in the whirlwind of life, a chance to step out of the noise of the world and to hear the still small voice that speaks louder than thunder. Many will pass by these days as if they were nothing. Many will laugh, many will dismiss, many will go on with their buying and selling, their eating and drinking, their distractions and entertainments. But for those with ears to hear, these days are a summons. To ignore them is to ignore the voice of the eternal. To honor them is to walk into the secret place of safety. History is filled with such moments. Before judgment comes, there is always a warning. Before the shaking, there is always a call to prepare. Noah heard it, and he built. The people of Nineveh heard it, and they repented. Israel heard it through the prophets again and again. And now, once more, the trumpet sounds. The 29th and 30th of August are not dates to fear, but dates to heed. For the shaking of the world has already begun. Economies tremble. Leaders rise and fall. Storms break forth. Foundations crack. But the people of God are not left without a word. The voice of the Lord declares that these days are appointed, and in them he calls his children to come apart, to enter into his presence, to seek his face. Do not miss the urgency of this call. The days are not casual, they are weighty. They are filled with divine purpose. They are a chance to align with the will of heaven, to prepare for what is to come, to intercede for the nation, to cover your family, to cleanse your own heart before the Lord. If you treat them as ordinary, you will gain nothing. But if you honor them as holy, if you step into the appointed moment, you will find grace, strength, and the covering of the Almighty. The 29th and 30th of August are a gift, a warning, and a window. They are not to be ignored. They are not to be wasted. They are days of appointment with God. When the word lockdown is spoken in this age, the mind of man turns to images of quarantine, restriction, fear, and walls that confine. But when the Spirit of God speaks of lockdown, he speaks not of captivity, but of consecration. He speaks not of fear, but of separation unto him. The world understands lockdown as isolation from one another, but heaven understands it as isolation from the noise of Babylon, from the endless distractions that dull the soul, from the idols that compete for the throne of the heart. The urgent lockdown that God declares is not about chains that bind the body, but about doors that shut the believer into the presence of the Almighty. There is a mystery hidden in the command to close the doors. When judgment was about to fall in Egypt, the children of Israel were commanded to shut themselves inside under the covering of the Lamb's blood while death passed over. When the flood was about to cover the earth, Noah and his family entered into the ark, and the Lord himself shut the door. When Elijah needed to see the hand of God, he withdrew to the mountain, hidden away from the noise of kings and armies. Again and again, the pattern is revealed before shaking comes. God calls his people to a holy lockdown, not of fear, but of preparation, not of panic, but of intimacy with him. To lock down in the Spirit is to silence the voices that compete for your attention. It is to turn off the endless stream of the world's chatter, the clamor of entertainment, the seduction of vanity, and the constant pull of the marketplace. It is to rediscover the power of stillness, to hear the whisper of God that is drowned out by the storm of distractions. The urgent lockdown of the appointed days is not about shutting away from life. It is about entering into true life, the life that flows from communion with the eternal. When God calls for a lockdown, he calls his people to build an inner sanctuary. It is an act of closing the doors of the heart against corruption, of shutting the gates of the eyes against impurity, of sealing the ears against the lies of the age. It is not retreat in weakness, but retreat into strength. For those who enter such a lockdown are not cut off from power. They are connected to the source of all power. They are not silenced by the world. They are attuned to the voice that spoke the world into being. In the urgency of these days, the lockdown is not optional. The storm grows louder, the world grows darker, and the shaking spreads. To face such times without the shelter of God's presence is folly. But to withdraw, to shut the door, to fall on your knees in prayer, to lift your voice in worship, to open the scroll of his word and eat of it. This is wisdom. This is life. This is the lockdown that brings victory. The command is urgent because the times are urgent. The window is narrow and the days appointed. And yet, this lockdown is not about despair, but about hope. It is not about shutting yourself away to wither, but shutting yourself away to be filled. It is in the secret place that strength is renewed. It is behind closed doors that tears are turned to peace, that fear is turned to courage, that confusion is turned to revelation. The lockdown of God is the preparation of his people for the battles to come. Those who obey will walk out clothed in light, carrying the fragrance of his presence, ready to stand when the world trembles. Therefore, heed the call. Do not see lockdown as a burden, but as a gift. Do not see it as chains, but as keys. The urgent lockdown is the path to freedom, the doorway into the shelter of his wings, the preparation for the shaking that lies ahead. Shut the door, enter in, and you will find the God who speaks in the silence. In the story of Noah lies a mystery for the final days, a picture that speaks to every generation, and a warning that resounds louder in our time than ever before. When judgment was appointed to come upon the earth, the Lord did not strike without first preparing a way of refuge for his people. He gave instructions, he gave a warning, he gave time. Noah was told to build an ark, a vessel of salvation, and when the day drew near, he and his family were commanded to enter. Then the word says something profound. It was the Lord himself who shut the door. That act of shutting was more than the closing of wood and pitch. It was the dividing line between life and death, between mercy and judgment, between those who heeded the voice of God and those who mocked it. The days of Noah are not distant history, they are prophecy. Yeshua himself declared that as it was in the days of Noah, so it would be at the coming of the Son of Man. People were eating, drinking, marrying, building, planting, living in the rhythm of normal life, until the flood came and swept them all away. The world was blind to the signs, deaf to the warnings, hardened to the call. Only a remnant, only Noah and his household obeyed. They heard the voice, they acted in faith. They shut the door. In that act, they were sealed from destruction. The parallel for our time could not be clearer. We live in days when the storm clouds gather, when the earth groans, when the foundations tremble. Yet the multitudes continue as though nothing were coming. They are entertained by the noise of the age, lulled to sleep by pleasure, blinded by pride, intoxicated by the idols of wealth, fame, and self. Few are those who discern the hour. Few are those who sense the urgency of the trumpet call. But to those who do, the call is the same as it was to Noah: enter the ark, shut the door, and be hidden in the presence of the Lord until the storm has passed. The ark of our day is not made of wood or sealed with pitch. It is the covering of God's Spirit, the covenant sealed by the blood of the Lamb. Just as Noah's family entered into the ark, so too are we called to enter into Messiah, to hide our lives in him, to dwell under the shadow of the Almighty. The urgent lockdown of the appointed days is nothing less than the reenactment of this ancient truth. The shutting of the door is not an act of fear, but of obedience. It is not an act of hiding from life, but of entering into true life. To close the door is to declare that you belong not to the world, but to God. Consider the mercy of God revealed in this picture. The flood did not fall until Noah was safe inside. Judgment did not begin until the door was shut. In the same way, the shaking of nations and the storms of judgment will not come without God first providing a place of refuge for his people. But the time is appointed, and the door will not remain open forever. There comes a moment when the door must close, when the time of choosing ends, and when the separation is sealed. Those who mocked Noah laughed until the rain began to fall, but by then it was too late. The day of grace had passed, and the moment of reckoning had arrived. The message of the parallel is urgent. Heed the warning before the storm. Do not be as those who are caught unaware, but as those who discern the hour and act in faith. Shut yourself in with God. Close the door of your heart to the world. Enter into the ark of his presence, and you will find safety in the day of shaking. The God who shut Noah in is the same God who will shut you in, if only you will answer his call. The days of Noah are upon us, and the ark is open, but soon the door will close. Now is the time to enter. The call that comes with the appointed days is not a passive one, not a suggestion to simply observe, but a summons to act, to move, to respond with the full weight of your being. The voice of God is not given for curiosity or speculation. It is given that his people may rise up, consecrate themselves, and stand in the gap. When the word goes forth that these days are to be set apart, it is not for idleness, but for engagement. The engagement of the soul in prayer, in fasting, in intercession, in turning the heart fully back to God. Prayer is not a ritual to be checked, but the very breath of the Spirit. In the urgency of this hour, prayer becomes the weapon, the shield, the lifeline. It is in prayer that the child of God communes with the Father, that burdens are lifted, that heaven's will is aligned with earth. To shut the door and not to pray is to waste the moment. To shut the door and pour out the heart in supplication is to seize the hour of visitation. Prayer in these days must not be shallow or distracted, but deep, desperate, earnest. It must be the cry of those who know the shaking is real and who plead for mercy, for guidance, for covering. Fasting joins with prayer as the sharpening of the Spirit. To fast is to lay aside the comforts of the flesh to gain the strength of the Spirit. It is to declare that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. In days of urgency, fasting is not optional. It is a tool of consecration, a way of breaking chains, of humbling the heart, of clearing the soul from the fog of the world. When the body is denied its cravings, the spirit becomes alert, sensitive, awake. And in the urgency of 29 and 30 August, fasting is a way of entering into the seriousness of the moment, of telling heaven and earth that you are not living for pleasure, but for God. Intercession is the cry not only for oneself, but for others. Abraham interceded for Sodom, Moses for Israel, Daniel for his people. Each one stood in the gap, pleading that mercy would triumph over judgment. In the same way, the urgent lockdown is not only for personal renewal, but for standing on behalf of families, cities, and nations. These days are to be filled with the voices of God's people lifting up petitions for the lost, for the wandering, for leaders, for the land. The storms of judgment are restrained when the prayers of the righteous ascend. The protection of God spreads when his people intercede. To ignore intercession in these days is to abandon the battlefield. To embrace it is to wield authority, to push back darkness, to call down light. The call to action is also a call to return. It is not enough to pray words while the heart remains far from God. These days are a chance to examine your life, to repent of hidden sins, to break away from compromise, to draw near in holiness. Prayer without repentance is empty. Fasting without surrender is meaningless. But when the heart turns back fully, when the lips cry out and the life aligns, then heaven responds and the power of God is unleashed. Do not miss the weight of this call. The hours are short. The days are appointed. If you will give yourself wholly to prayer, to fasting, to intercession in these 2 days, you will not only enter into safety, but will become an instrument of God's mercy in the earth. You will stand like a watchman on the wall, like a priest before the altar, like a warrior on the front lines. The call to action is urgent because the times are urgent. To answer it is to partner with the purposes of heaven. To ignore it is to stand aside while the tide of history moves. The choice is before you. The hour we live in is not like other hours. The earth trembles, nations rage, kingdoms are shaken, and yet multitudes live as if nothing were happening. But the truth cannot be hidden. We are in the days of shaking. The signs are everywhere. Storms increasing in strength, fires consuming the land, economies faltering, governments in turmoil, wars and rumors of wars spreading across the earth. The very foundations of the world order tremble, as if creation itself were groaning. This is not chaos without meaning. It is the voice of God declaring that the time is urgent, that the days are short, that the window is narrowing. When the shaking begins, everything that is not rooted in God is exposed. What is built on sand will fall. What is built on the rock will stand. The urgent warning of these appointed days is to awaken the people of God before the greater storms come. Just as birth pangs grow closer and stronger before the child is born, so the shakings of this world are intensifying, pointing toward the fulfillment of prophecy and the return of the King. Yet, as in the days of Noah, most are blind to it. They continue in their routines, their pleasures, their distractions, until the flood is upon them. The urgency of the hour is not meant to drive us to despair, but to drive us to decision. We are not given these warnings to fill us with fear, but to prepare us with faith. The people of God must understand that every shaking is a summons, every trembling a trumpet. When towers fall, when markets crash, when nations collapse, it is not merely history unfolding. It is prophecy sounding. It is God calling His children to wake up, to lift up their eyes, to return to Him with all their hearts. Consider how fragile the systems of man truly are. In a moment, economies that seemed unshakable can crumble. In a day, governments that appeared immovable can fall. In an instant, the idols of power and wealth can be reduced to dust. Yet God remains. His throne is not shaken. His kingdom does not tremble. His promises do not fail. That is why the urgency of the hour is not a message of terror, but a message of hope. For when all else is shaken, the kingdom that cannot be shaken will remain, and those who dwell in it will be secure. The appointed days of 29 and 30th August are a microcosm of this truth. They are set apart as a reminder that time is running short, that life is not guaranteed, that the days of comfort and complacency are ending. They are a chance to step out of the illusion that the world will always continue as it has. They are a trumpet blast saying, "Prepare your heart. Return to your God. Anchor your life in the unshakable kingdom. For when the storm rages, it will be too late to build your foundation. The time to prepare is now, while the window of mercy is still open." Do not think the urgency of this hour applies only to the world out there. It comes down to each life, each family, each heart. The shaking will reveal where you stand. If your faith is in wealth, what happens when wealth vanishes? If your hope is in leaders, what happens when they fall? If your joy is in pleasures, what happens when pleasures dry up? Only those who have their foundation in the Lord will endure. Only those who have made Him their refuge will stand unshaken. The urgency of the hour is the mercy of God. He warns before He acts. He shakes that which can be shaken, so that what is eternal might remain. He calls before the door is shut. The trumpet is sounding now. Repent, return, seek Him while He may be found. For the hour is late, the shaking is real, and the time to choose is now. When the word of warning comes, it is never without the word of hope. The voice of God does not call His people to lock themselves away in terror, but to retreat into the place of refuge, the sanctuary of His presence, the shelter of His wings. The days of shaking may be dark, the storms fierce, but the children of God are not left defenseless. Every call to repent is also an invitation to be restored. Every warning of judgment is also an offer of mercy. Every command to separate from the world is a promise of protection in Him. Hope is not found in the systems of man, for they will fall. Hope is not found in wealth, for it will vanish. Hope is not found in leaders, for they rise and fall like grass. True hope is found only in the one who cannot be shaken, the Lord of hosts. The urgent lockdown of the appointed days is not about fear, but about stepping into the ark of His presence. Just as Noah and his family were sealed inside until the flood passed, so too will those who take refuge in the Almighty be sealed in safety. The storms may rage outside, but the peace of God will guard the hearts of those within. To dwell in His shelter is not a poetic phrase, but a living reality. It means that when fear comes, faith answers. When confusion rises, His word speaks. When chaos surrounds, His Spirit covers. The world may be collapsing, but those under His wings find that the shadow of the Almighty is stronger than the fury of the storm. It is written that 1,000 may fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. That promise is not given to the world. It is given to those who dwell in the secret place, who abide in His presence, who make the Lord their refuge. Protection in these days does not mean the absence of trouble, but the presence of God in the midst of it. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were not spared from the furnace, but the Son of God walked with them in the flames. Daniel was not spared from the lion's den, but the lions' mouths were shut by the hand of heaven. Israel was not spared from Egypt's plagues, but they were covered by the blood, and destruction passed over them. In the same way, the children of God in this hour will not escape the shaking of the world, but they will be held, protected, and sustained through it. The urgent lockdown is a call to step into that place of safety. It is not the safety of walls or locks, but the safety of His covenant, the covering of His Spirit, the embrace of His presence. To obey is to find peace when the world is in panic. To obey is to stand firm when others collapse. To obey is to know that no matter how great the storm, the hand of God is greater still. And yet, this hope is not only for ourselves. When God protects His people, He makes them lights in the darkness. He shelters them so that they can become a shelter for others. He comforts them so that they can bring comfort to the broken. He preserves them so that they can be a witness to the world. The urgent lockdown is not the end, but the preparation. Out of the place of refuge, God's people will rise up, carrying the fragrance of His presence, shining with His light, standing as testimonies of His faithfulness. So do not hear the call as a summons to despair, but as an invitation to hope. Do not hear it as the voice of judgment alone, but as the voice of mercy. Do not see it as a shutting away from life, but as a hiding in the giver of life. The storm will pass, but the flood will subside. But those who have dwelt in the shelter of the Most High will come forth stronger, purified, and radiant. The wings of God are stretched wide. The refuge is open. The protection is ready. Enter in, and you will not be afraid when the shaking comes.